Well, good evening, folks. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Gigi's Ghastly Ghosts. How do you feel about Ouija boards? I'm going to start out by telling you my experience with Ouija boards. Now, mind you, I don't have a ton of experience with strange goings-on, but the first time I ever got in a Ouija board, I was 14 years old, and I was actually working in a restaurant. And a manager there was cleaning out the office of the restaurant and found this Ouija board. Said, hey, anybody want this? Or it's going in the trash. And of course, I wanted it. I was very interested. I'd never seen one in real life. I'd only heard about them at this point. So, 14 years old, I tell all my friends I got it. We have a sleepover, and there's 4 or 5 of us gathered around this Ouija board in my dark bedroom, candles lit. And, here we are carrying on and giggling, and you're pushing it. No, you're pushing it. Finally, all that ends, and, finally everybody gets serious. Takes a good bit of time for all these girls to settle down and get serious, right? Well, finally when we get serious, we're asking it questions, and it pops up with a series of numbers. One of the girls says, I know that. That is my neighbor's phone number. So, I don't know whether this is really her neighbor's phone number or not. She was pretty insistent that this was her neighbor's phone number. After that, I don't remember if she ever found out or if we ever found out what the deal was with the neighbor and the phone number, but right after that, she was kind of spooked, so we ended up stopping the Ouija board session after that, and, nothing happened the rest of the night, but for the couple weeks after that, I had this Ouija board tucked away in my bookshelf, and I had it sitting vertically, and I also had the planchette sitting vertically over it. Well, all I heard all night long was tap, 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 all night long from that planchette up against the Ouija board. So I separated them. I took the planchette and I put it totally across the bedroom from that thing. I don't remember if it ever found it again, but the next time I played with that Ouija board, I was 16 years old. We had moved. We were in a much bigger house. I slept on the second floor. That's where my bedroom was. My mom was married at the time, and their bedroom was on the first floor, down by the kitchen. So it was a pretty good-sized house. In the middle of the night, it was maybe not the middle of the night. It was probably 10 o'clock at night. I was having a friend stay all night, and then we had 2 boys over, a couple of friends, and we were playing with the Ouija board that night. The boys were terrified of this Ouija board. They'd always been told it was a horrible thing, so they were already scared. When we played with this Ouija board, I could not tell you what happened, what we asked it, because I don't remember. That's not the part I remember about the story. What I do remember is that my stepfather was downstairs sleeping at the time. He had to be to work. He had to leave the house at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work. Well, the next evening, I got in big trouble for playing with the Ouija board, and I couldn't figure out why I was in trouble or where the Ouija board went. Come to find out, early in the morning, 4:30, my stepfather is on the road to work, and all of a sudden, looks in his rearview mirror, and all of a sudden sees a demon face peering back at him from his back seat. He slammed on his brakes, apparently went off the road, hit a tree, got in a car accident on his way to work. That's how scared he was. Apparently, in the middle of the night, something told him that I was playing with the Ouija board. That was in his dream, and then that's what he saw in his back seat on the way to work. Now, whether or not I really drew that thing here, being a 16-year-old kid with a couple of schoolmates playing with it, asking it questions, I doubt it. I really doubt it. I think this man had demons of his own. So I don't think I was the cause of it, but I'm pretty sure he saw that demon in his back seat, and I'm pretty sure to this day that poor man is still dealing with his demons. When I was 16 and that happened to him, my Ouija board came up missing. My mom told me that he had broken it in half and thrown it in the trash. So I just took it as okay. Wow. When I was 32, I moved to Phoenix, Arizona. As I am unpacking all of the kids' games and all my games and our books and things like that, what do I find in that box? My Ouija board. I know darn well he broke it in half and threw it away. I found this thing, original box, mint condition. My box wasn't even flattened from being in the box with all the other games. Very interesting. I hadn't seen that thing since I was 16 years old. How it got in there, where it came from, I do not know. I'll probably never know. But when we moved in, my daughter quickly made some friends, and I made friends with her friend's mother, and the kids were messing around one day and said, "Hey, can we play that Ouija board?" And I thought, "Oh, well, it can't hurt. It's just a game." So I gave them the Ouija board to play. They were on the living room floor. Sophie and I were sitting on the sofa. That's her friend Anna's mother, watching the kids play this Ouija board. Well, they get all giggly and then they get scared. I don't know what they asked it to get scared, but they got scared. So they stopped playing this Ouija board immediately, which is fine. We picked it up. I put it away. Nothing really came of the Ouija board. But it's just a strange thing that when I was unpacking, I found it again, and it shouldn't have been there. I mean, I didn't see it for years. Where did it come from? Then, later on, a friend of mine got married and had her bachelorette party in Bisbee, Arizona. We stayed at the very haunted Copper Queen Hotel. And before we left, she says, "Hey, do you still have that Ouija board?" I said, "Yes." She says, "Can you bring that along?" So I did. Some of the girls, when I say girls, they're all in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, not really girls, but women, wanted to play with this Ouija board. Two groups of the gals stayed in the haunted part of the old hotel, and one of like the third floor, I think it is. We stayed in the part that was newer outside, an outside building. So they took my Ouija board up with them in the night. I don't know what happened to them. I never got the full story because there was a whole bunch of us and it was a very chaotic weekend, but I never got the whole story. All I know is that whatever happened scared them so badly that some of them came down and stayed in our rooms, and they separated the board from the planchette in two separate rooms because of whatever went on. They never said, but they felt that they needed to separate these things. And of course, I never told them any of my story. I didn't really know all these women. So when we were leaving to go home for the weekend, I asked for my board back. Well, I got the board. I was not given the planchette, and I was kind of miffed because I thought, how rude. They couldn't find the planchette. Everybody's packing their stuff. No one really cared. They acted like it was no big deal. Why was I asking for it? And by this time, in this age, I'm feeling like this board keeps coming back to me for a reason, and I think it's just to keep it safe. So I keep it safely tucked away in my closet. Needless to say, I couldn't find the planchette. So I was miffed. I took my board, I put it in the box, we went back home. At some point, I open up this Ouija board, and there's my planchette tucked away in the little 3-prong cardboard piece that divides it from the board. That's its home. It lives there. I always keep it that way. I don't let them touch, and I just keep it safely in my closet. But they are back together, and that's where they live, and that's where they'll stay. And speaking of Ouija stories, I have a quick little subscriber story about an Ouija board. This comes from Brenda, and she says, "When I was in my teens and early 20s, a few of my friends dabbled in Ouija boards, and I called on my friend's house. They were playing with one. I won't play with one at all, as I think they're unlucky and a portal for unhappy souls. Anyway, they weren't having any luck communicating until I arrived, and boy, it got all kinds of busy. All kinds of weird sentences got spelled. My name popped up with one sentence, and it said, 'Go home now.' The message was supposed to be from a neighbor, Dave Hilton, that I was very fond of. I called him my boyfriend, even though he was always Mr. Hilton to his face. I liked him because he was nice. He was kind and always smiling when I saw him. He passed away from cancer when I was about 15 or 16, and I missed him, and I was very sad. The message was alarming, as this was well before cell phones. I had to call home to find out if all was well there. I'm not sure if the message was just saying to leave, and I don't know where home was, as my parents moved from where I knew him, and I had moved into my own place too. All was well at home, and I never did figure the warning unless it was just to get me away from the spirit board. To this day, I won't have one in my house. I never will. And speaking of subscriber stories, Brenda actually sent me another one called The Fortune Teller, The Psychic Fortune Teller. And I'm going to read this one to you as well. I grew up in Liverpool, UK, but I now live in Northwest Florida as I married a man in the US military, and growing up I had close cousins that visited every weekend. We were close enough in age that we spent many nights sleeping over. As I was always fascinated by a box of ribbons that my mother kept in her dressing table that she called Tommy's ribbons. When I was old enough to understand, she told me I had a cousin die when he was an infant. My aunt had 3 children and just given birth to my youngest cousin when he was 5 days old. Her middle child, Tommy, was about 20 months old and had been suffering from a bowel problem and had to go see the doctor. While he was there, he had a bad reaction to something and apparently choked on vomit and passed away. That is very sad. Everyone was in shock, and my aunt was beside herself because she wasn't even with him. He was buried with my grandfather and grandmother. The ribbons were collected from the flowers that adorned his coffin and grave. Now I'm in my 20s. I'm working late. I promised to go with a friend to see a woman who was supposed to be a psychic fortune teller at her house and meet a friend there. We preferred to go together and listen to each other's readings so we would not forget anything or any details that were told to us. When I got there, my friend had already left, and the woman wanted to cancel as she had a sick child in another room, but she had bade me to come inside and put me in another room. She had me cut the tarot cards, told me about my life, and here's where things get interesting. She kept looking at me strangely and told me a few things that I dismissed as rubbish about how my life was going to not be difficult and I may never get the best things, but I will get everything I need in life, even if it comes used. Then she proceeded to claim that I had many past relatives and friends that wished to be remembered. I was told many male figure around me, and she rattled off many names I knew and asked if I knew someone named Thomas. I said I had no idea who she was talking about because my dad had many brothers passed away, none called Thomas. And that was his name, so no Thomas. She then gestured about a heavy force, and it kind of went to slap her face, saying, "Heavy force, very bad." I thought for a moment and said the name Jeffrey, a friend who had died in a car crash, and she shook her head and said, "Nope, that's not the one, but he's smiling at you." And I knew instantly who she was talking about, my lovely Steph. Steph, who had had an accident when riding his motorcycle and lost his front teeth. And when I saw him, I said, "Who do I need to beat up?" And he just said, "A little old man that pulled out in front of him, causing him to be launched over a car and losing his teeth on impact." I loved his grin, sense of humor, and blonde locks, and his friends were a group of playful rascals that just made me smile, and they looked after each other. The night Steph was killed, he and his friends were going to a nightclub, and on the way he had decided to play a silly game. On the way, Steph ran across the road, slipped and fell under a bus that rolled over him. I was devastated when I found out the next morning. I said it was Steph, and she said, "That's him, and he wants you to remember him." And I said, "I'll never forget him. I miss him very much," which was promptly interrupted by her saying she was so sorry, but Thomas is very insistent you know him and asked you to remember if anyone lost a child, which made my spine tingle. And I said, yes, my aunt lost a little boy named Tommy, and said he was a baby. "Who are you talking about? A man, right?" She says, "Yes, he's a young man now, and he's very happy that you have figured it out." She says he has grown in the afterlife and very persistent. Frankly, I was blown away after hearing this. And also at many other details she gave me about other things, and wondered, are we really finished when we die? The next day, I went back to work, and I met my friend, who, what a load of crap she was told, and never going back to her again. I told her what happened to me and just wished she had waited till I got there. When I got home from work, my doorbell rang, and it was my parents, and in my mother's hands was an electric water kettle. "Here," she says, "now you don't have to buy one, as I just bought a new one today." Yes, it was secondhand. When I was older, I got engaged to be married and was given my grandmother's wedding ring and my great-grandmother's heirloom ring to be melted and made into my wedding rings. Secondhand. One day I had an epiphany. Even the man I married 36 years ago was divorced. Say no more. Well, that ends to be a great story, Brenda. So I just want to say thank you to Brenda for submitting those stories. If any of you have an Ouija story or any paranormal story, If you'd like me to tell your story, email me, jenijgough@gmail.com. I will leave my email in the description box below. And that's going to wrap up our night. Thanks for listening, folks, and you'll hear from me again next Saturday night.